Welcome back. On today's video, I wanted to do a quick comparison of blue collar and white collar jobs. There's a lot of videos out there talking about how white collar people make more money. There's a lot of videos on the other side saying blue collar people make a lot more money. And both can actually be right. So let's dig into some of those details. This will not be a thorough, exhaustive analysis, but this will give some information on what I've seen, different statistics, and you can make up your own mind. So jumping right in, the first thing I wanted to do was go to an article on Indeed.com talking about white collar versus blue collar jobs. This goes into the difference. High level, for those who don't know, white collar is typically people who work in an office, people who work in a professional field. Generally, for the higher paying jobs, it requires advanced education. Blue collar typically involves manual labor or trade related work. It does not necessarily require the college education that a white collar job might, but it does require for you to progress and earn a good wage, an advanced skill set that may be obtained by apprenticeship or interning or learning a skill and perfecting your skill, which is in fact a type of education. It just may not go through traditional means. So this talks about a few different things. We're not going to go into those details. Let's go into a few different types of things that a white collar job may be. So for example, an accountant, a market researcher, health service administrator, attorney, software engineer. As you can see, all of these are things that would require generally a degree. Now, it is entirely possible for people to get into these types of fields without having an advanced degree. However, it is more likely and more probable that they will be successful in these type of fields with a degree. For example, being an attorney, there are states that will let you pass the bar or sit for the bar without going to law school, but they generally require you working for a law firm under direct tutelage of attorneys, and then you still do have to sit for the bar. Those are just a couple of examples. Now, a few examples of the blue collar jobs would be like a warehouse associate, inspector, packer, mechanic, HVAC tech, electrician. Usually for the HVAC tech and the electrician, you will need to do some sort of apprenticeship with people who know what they're doing so that you can learn how to do these types of works. There are people who are self-taught mechanics and do very well, and these are all different types of things that you can do. Now, who makes more? If we get into white collar versus blue collar job, this is a website called payscale.com that goes into certain different fields and compares them. Let's jump in and I'll give you some thoughts as we go through. So this talks about a college professor or a prison guard. You would think a college professor would make more money. It talks about here the average job salaries for a mid-career prison guard being $60,000, which is 3% higher than the typical salary for a mid-career college professor of $58,000. Civil engineer or elevator installer, same type of thing. The civil engineer, the elevator installer range is $63,500, where the typical salary for a mid-career civil engineer is $61,600. Now, I do need to put a caveat here. This is from 2009, and some of these jobs most of these jobs have increased, but some of them have probably increased significantly. Engineering, for example, has become more and more demanding. I'm not sure how the elevator installer repairer type career has gone. Landscape architect or truck driver, the guy who does the soil work, the average job salary for a mid-career landscape architect, and this is not a landscaper, this is a landscape architect, is around $51,539, where the mid-career truck driver is $46,694. So in this case, the landscape architect has it. This was an interesting one. A clinical laboratory scientist who makes around $59,000. Let me make sure that's right. Nope, actually the scientist makes around $56,000, which is less than the mid-career contractor who makes around $59,000. Bank teller or auto mechanic. The average for a auto mechanic is $41,000, where the typical salary for a mid-career bank teller is $21,000. So what you're seeing here is there are a lot of instances where a blue-collar worker can make more than a white-collar employee. What I have seen historically is this is generally if you have a white-collar employee who is not furthering their career, they're not pushing to advance their career, they're comfortable where they're at, and they can easily make less. I have seen people with master's degrees working in underwriting jobs where people who are salespeople are making significantly more than them, and the degree doesn't matter. It had more to do with their ability to progress in their career. And it's not all about the education. A lot of it is about attitude as well and drive to improve yourself as opposed to leaning solely on that education. There are a number of instances, as we're seeing in here, where blue collar people can make more money. Now, here's something else that I've seen though. A lot of blue collar work seems to be hourly driven, meaning you are strictly exchanging your time for money. White collar work, a lot of times, yes, it does have that same component, but there are a lot of times more salary driven, meaning they have paid time off. If they need to take a 2-week vacation, they can do that. If they have 10 sick days a year, they have that and they get paid as well. There's also a significant amount of upside potential, as I call it, meaning career advancements. They are able to advance their career, to progress, to get promotions more frequently than the blue collar work. That's not across the board. There's plenty of blue collar work where they can get promotions, but in the white collar field, it seems to be more prevalent, with the opportunity to expand up the corporate ladder and ultimately become managers or vice presidents or even CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, whatever it may be, because those options are available. A lot of times the blue collar work is for smaller companies, smaller entities, and you're limited to basically the role you're in, maybe a manager position, or you may need to start your own business. A lot of the blue collar work, especially when you get into the construction, the contracting, the HVAC, the electricians, plumbers, those people who start their own businesses are able to do very, very well if they have business sense and don't go about it the wrong way. Now, the next thing I wanted to hop over to was a 2023 National Occupational Study from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And again, you can see here, May of 2023, National Occupational Employment and Wage Estimates. I have simply come in here and sorted this by salaries that people are making on average. And my scroll function is having a little bit of trouble here, so let's try to get in. And I just wanted to go through sorting by the annual mean wage, not the average, but the mean, on what these people make. Pediatric surgeons, you'll see as we start off here that a lot of these are white collar. Simply because the top earners a lot of times are white collar. This excludes the one-offs, the professional sports people, the people that are really hitting it out of the park, pun intended, and what they're making. But you can see here, pediatric surgeons, $449,000. I am surprised that radiologists is as far as down as it is in the 2023 study, because recent studies actually put them over $450,000 on average a year. If we go through this list, most of these are medical. If you can get into the medical field, generally speaking, you're going to do very, very well for the next foreseeable future as we have an aging population. Then we get down here to sports, athletes and sports competitors at $328,000. Again, this is going to be the top 1% of all sports figures, where pediatric surgeons, this is not the top 1% of the pediatric surgeons that are making that. That's the mean. But this is professional sports. Then you're back into medical. We're in medical all the way down here to physicians, and your standard average physician making $263,000. Then we get into chief executives. CEOs of companies obviously are paid very, very well. You have the one-offs that are making tens of millions of dollars per year, but on general, the mean annual wage is $258,000. Then we're back into quasi-medical with psychiatrists, airline pilots, physicians, all others. Again, medical, dentist, dental type medicine, and again, I've seen dentists making much, much more than this. Aircrafts, pediatricians, dentists. You can see the top 20, 30 of this list is all medical or medically related fields. Then we get down into computer and information services, system managers. These are the managers of those departments, making on average $180,000. Lawyers, financial managers, architects, natural science managers, marketing managers, podiatrists. We're still in largely the medical field. Then we get down into marketing and sales managers in the $160,000 range, advertising, marketing. These are all still white collar jobs, and we have to go all the way down. Let's see. Now, actually, I should caveat, sales is a field where performance matters as much or more than education. Jumping into the career from college or without college, it does help to have an advanced degree, especially if you're in a drug-related field. However, if you're in any other field, and even some drug-related fields, you can get into that without that college or the advanced education. You have to present yourself very, very well, though. You have to come across as someone who performs well, who comes across as coherent, educated, smart, so that people will believe you and want to buy your product. So we're still in the white collar fields. All the way down, I'm still looking for where the blue collar fields kick in. Now, granted, the incomes here are still on a much higher end of the income field. When the average income in the United States, the average individual income is well less than $100,000. All of these fields are still over $100,000. But if this is the type of income you want to make, you can see the probabilities here. Not that you can't make more than this, but the probabilities are weighed heavily towards people with that advanced education being able to get into one of these fields that pays the most. Now, when we get all the way down, we're coming still biologists, healthcare practitioners, data scientists. Wow, this is actually surprising, getting down into the range of where the blue collar field is, the blue collar incomes are. Biologists. So again, these are still heavy on education. It does require a lot of education. Okay, now when we get down here to ship and boat captains and operators, $94,000. That is a field that doesn't necessarily, in my experience, require any post-high school education. Power plant operators, with skill and with training, they may be able to get in that field. Post-secondary education, of course, you do. Communications teachers, budget analysts, epidemiologists, chiropractors, financial specialists, music directors, and composers is a field, if you have talent, if you're in the art world, that works. Writers and authors. Now we're getting into skills, where people are be able to have the skills to be able to get out and make a living without that secondary education. Broadcast announcers, radio disc jockeys, sales representatives, wholesale and manufacturer. Those are areas where you can do it. Real estate brokers with the right experience, you can get a brokerage without that education. Entertainment and recreational managers, editors, they generally prefer people have those advanced English degrees. Credit counselors and loan officers is actually a field that you absolutely can get into without that advanced education. Miscellaneous plant system operators. So we're seeing that we're getting into those opportunities. However, the higher income opportunities based on the actual performance of the general American population, it does require those advanced degrees to achieve those other levels. Now, there are plenty of blue-collar business owners that I have seen, met, know, that are making a significant amount of money. They're making deep six figures because they have a skill set, they've established that business, they've developed that business, and they took that risk to jump out there and start their own business. However, if they're working for someone else, they're generally not getting in to those higher income levels. So this is a pretty comprehensive list. This is actually based on statistics from 2023. It's not to say that you cannot get an education, you cannot get a good income without having an education, yes. However, it does show you that to achieve those deep six figures, the statistical probability is weighed heavily in the favor of those who have that advanced degree. Now, if you're someone who doesn't want to worry about that, you're comfortable at the income levels, let's say here, real estate agents and brokers making $73,000 a year on average. There's plenty of high-end realtors making deep six figures, sometimes seven figures. However, the average, the mean, even the mean, is much less than that, as you can see here. And I can tell you the real estate brokers and sales agents, in the last couple of years, their income have dropped significantly on average, not across the board, but just because the volume of sales is way down, as well as loans, the volume of loans being performed are way down. Flight attendants, curators, potentially fundraisers, are someone that absolutely not necessarily have to have that education, as long as they have the skill set to be able to raise money from different people. There's a lot of different things, but we're starting to see here that the income levels definitely are lower for the average blue-collar job. Now, here's something else I'm going to say. The advanced education is not necessarily tied to the college you go to unless you're in specific fields. For example, academia absolutely cares about the college you go to. Most of these other career fields don't really care what you go to. They care more about how you did in college, what your grades were, and the knowledge that you actually come out with, and the benefit you can bring to the company right away. So that diploma gets you in the door. The unfortunate reality is our colleges don't always train people the way that they should or could to be better prepared for a career. But what college does do very well is it exposes you to a lot of different people, careers, options, and skills that then you could transfer into your new career. So if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I am not a big fan of going into debt for college. However, we do have to look at these statistics. There may be people that say, well, I don't really care about those stats. I'm going into the field that I love, and that's just fine. As long as we understand what we're getting ourselves into, what the income potentials are, and know how we're going to get there and have a plan for it, that's the only thing we can ask for. So I hope this is helpful to you. If it is, please give us a like down below. If you'd like to see more content like this, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone this may help, do share. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.